and welcome to this new skin tutorial. For this one I've chosen a Hanna Karlzon illustration that I quite like, and I've done it a few times now, so I thought that this was a great one to start with. I've scanned the image from the book and printed it out on Strathmore Tone Tan paper, and I've used Caran d'Ache Luminance pencils. These are my preferred pencil, but I can understand that maybe many of you don't have them. So I've tried to find the pretty much equivalent colors of Polychromos and Prismas. So to the left you can see the colors of the Luminance, in the middle is the Polychromos, and to the right is Prismacolor. I was quite surprised really to find that for the Polychromos I was able to find colors quite similar to the Luminance colors, and it was more challenging finding similar colors for the Prismas, and I would have thought before I started this that it would be the other way around. So these are just the colors that I found were most similar. I haven't tried them, so I don't know if they would come out the same, and especially if you do this on a white paper, it might not look the same as it will do on my tan paper. But I still think these are good skin color combinations, so it's worth giving it a go. So I think I am quite a slow colorist, so I know people asked if I can do this in real time, but that video would just be too long. So I've sped this up 4 times. I do think that it would be possible to slow it down on YouTube if necessary, but I think you should be able to see quite clearly here what I'm doing with the speed that I'm having. Okay, so I've started with putting down the highlight, so where I think will be the lightest part, I use this Primrose pencil. I'm just doing it quite roughly to start with, and I will adjust this as I go on, but it's just marking out those spaces where at least I won't put any dark pencil. Once I'm done putting down the highlights, I will move on and use my Burnt Sienna 10%. So this will be the second lightest pencil that I'm using. And I will put this down on all the areas where I have not put the highlights. I will also start just shaping the nose a little bit at the tip. It will be much darker later, but it's just for me to get more of an idea of what I'm trying to do with the nose, and it will be easier later on when I add the darker color. So once I'm done putting down this color, I will move on and color the eye. Normally I would just do a little bit of the eye and then come back to it later as more of the face was being done, but I've now tried to do the whole eye in one go so that you can follow that. So there is of course many different ways to do the eyes. I tend to put on quite a bit of makeup, simply because that's what I prefer and that's what I like, but obviously you don't have to make her as dark around the eyes as I do. So I start by putting down the white, so obviously I colour the white of the eye white first, and then I have some white at the inner side of the eye towards the nose, and then a little bit underneath. I also add some white close to the eyebrow. I then go on to using the black one, and what I'm trying to do here is to create a bit of a wet line at the bottom of the eye, because this illustration didn't have one. The eye will look much more realistic if you add this. Another thing that is important if you want to make the eye look as realistic as possible is to add shadow at both sides of the eye, because the eyeball, it is round, so it will be darker at the edges of the eye. For the iris, I normally just put down a marker first, or whatever colour I want, and then I go over with pencil after. And for this particular one I chose to have brown eyes, and then I go over with a bit of a yellow and the white colour to make it lighter at the bottom and darker at the top. I also add some either dark brown or black around the edges of the iris to make it look more realistic, because that's how our eyes look like, and I add some black at the top because there will be the shadow from the eyelashes hanging over. I will then go on to put some black on top of the eyelid, and in this crease will be a bit darker. Obviously here you can go quite dark, as I tend to do, or you can just have it a little bit dark. You don't have to use black. I add a bit of white with just a pencil to the pupil in the eye. For this I will probably go over later with some Posca or something to make it pop a bit more. At this point I'm happy enough with the eye, and I feel that I can go on and start the shading around the eye. And for this I start with the darkest of the sienna, so the burnt sienna, and I do put that on, not on top but above the eyelid. Let's make it right now. And also underneath. But I do keep like the middle part underneath the eye, I keep light. And the reason why I keep it a little bit lighter underneath the eye is because, like I said, the eyeball is round, so it will be a little bit lighter. Maybe not as much as I like to to have, but it will be a little bit lighter just in the middle. So for now I find that this is dark enough, and I will go on and use the middle sienna, so the burnt sienna 50%, and just try to blend that in as well as I can. And I'm taking my time with this because I want to make it look good already now, so I want to make it as smooth looking as possible, so I'm very particular here with my shading, so I spend a lot of time trying to make it as good as possible. And I do believe that is like the secret to why I'm able to make the skin look very smooth. It's because I spend a lot of time on it. So I moved on to the burnt sienna 10% now, just to get the transitions between the primrose and the burnt sienna 50% to be smoother. So here I forgot myself a little bit, and I started adding the burnt sienna 50% to the forehead, but then decided no, I need to continue with the eye. That's my plan, is to finish the eye first. So I'm back to using the black now. Wasn't dark enough for me, so I'm just making that line between the eyelid and the top of the eye, I suppose, even darker. And now I'm also adding the eyelashes. So for the eyelashes, it's really good to use the Polychromos pencil. It is much harder than the Prisma and the Luminance, and it's much easier to get the individual hair strands. Also, when you're doing eyelashes, they are, you know, naturally bent. So the way I do it is that when I draw an eyelash, I first draw it kind of like downwards and then up in like a little bend, if that makes sense. And I make sure that the eyelashes doesn't go all the way to the inner part of the eye. There won't be any eyelashes there. I also add a little bit of pink on the wet line and the inner part of the eye. Okay, so now I'm starting to get more happy with the eye, and I continue on the rest of the face. So now I'm using the middle sienna, the burnt sienna 50%. Now mainly on the places I want to be darker. But I'm deciding here that I can't just use the sienna, I need to add another colour to make it a bit more warm, a bit more goldy in a way. So I'm changing here to the burnt ochre 50% to get the more of a golden feel to it. Yeah. I coloured this girl not long ago, but I didn't record it. But I really enjoy doing her, but on the last one I was using Prismacolor pencils, and I decided for this one to use the Luminance. Maybe it would have been easier to use the Prismas, but I'm running out. Some of them are just too short, and I want to get more familiar with my Luminance, because those I can easily get open stock where I live. I can't get Prismas. And because of that, I'm spending more time here getting the colours right, the colour combo, making the skin the colour I want. So as I continue to struggle with getting the colours completely right, I might as well just talk about some other things. I just really want to emphasize that the things that I'm showing you here, those are only things that I have, you know, figured out, and this is what works for me. I'm sure that a lot of the techniques that I'm using is probably not the best or the more efficient, but it is something that I've figured out, and it works for me. But it does not mean that this is the only or the best way of doing it by any means. When I was 16 to 17, I did go to this art school. It's like equivalent to A levels before I started university. So that is kind of like my background, but I hadn't really touched colouring pencils until 2 years ago when I got my first Johanna Bashford book. But I do think that a combination of my background and my interest maybe makes it easier for me to understand and see where highlights and shadows should be, at least roughly, because I know some struggle with that, and I just think that with those things it will become more apparent and easy to understand the more you colour. So I'm adding now some pink to the cheekbones, because I suppose that makes sense. But just in general, I do tend to use quite a bit of pink in the face. I can't remember how much pink I used in this face, but it's a good colour. Even though I said in the last video that I had learned from my mistakes by colouring outside the camera, this clearly isn't so. But luckily I did realise it quite quickly. So here I'm just trying to add a little bit more structure and shape and shadow around the eye. I'm just adding like a tiny little wrinkly thing. It's probably a good thing that like quite a big portion of this face is covered by the hair, because imagine how long it would take otherwise. And again, if I were to credit something for my results when I colour, it would definitely be my patience when it comes to colouring. Weirdly enough, I don't have any patience whatsoever when it comes to other things, but with this I'm like the most patient person in the world, and I do think that that is really important when you do this type of work or hobby. So I'm now just trying to kind of like define the shadows that I've already made, so I know roughly where they're going to be, but I'm now going over with the darker, the burnt sienna 50%. So when I colour, I have quite a loose grip, so I apply the colour quite gently. By doing so, you can put much more layers than you would be able to if you were colouring very hard. And as I mentioned before, this paper is really good. It has some tooth, so you can apply quite a few layers, and if and when you make a mistake, you can easily erase it and the paper is still fine. You can colour over no problem. Because sometimes, especially when you're doing the cheekbones, it might be that you place the shadow like slightly further down on one side compared to the other. So to me, it is very important to colour on a paper where I'm able to fix those mistakes. Again, I just also want to underline that if you use these colours that I'm using here, or the equivalent of the Prisma or the Polys, if you use another paper than the one I'm using here, the colours will look different. I'm confident it will still be like a decent looking skin colour, it's just it won't look exactly like this one. So I'm going to start on the nose now, and I very often tend to edit the nose quite a bit to get it to look more like I want it. As you can see, I'm hiding the outer black lines of the nose. This is another great thing with using this paper. You can easily hide those black lines just using a white pencil. So there are ways to remove those lines also on white paper, like you can use Posca or gel pen, maybe not so good, but some use acrylic paint. So I have used white Posca before to remove black lines, for example on the mouth and the nose. The only thing is that it can be quite hard to colour on top of that. At least you have to make sure that it has properly dried before you colour on top, and then you have to be careful when you colour on top. So what I've done here is that I've moved the nostrils a bit closer together, and the outskirts of the nose I've moved them in a little bit, just to get the more petite nose, I suppose. You can of course just keep the original lines and colour around them and just do the same as I'm doing here, just keeping those lines. But I just thought with this video that I really wanted to show you like how I would do this colouring, how I normally do things, and how I hide lines and how I just edit the face to look more like I prefer, basically. I do find the nose one of the hardest things to do, and because of that you'll see that I'll be spending quite a lot of time on this nose. I add shadow just a little bit at a time, looking at it, seeing if it looks right, then adding a bit more. Often I have to do some erasing as well because I went too dark. So the nose, like the tip of the nose is normally, it has some quite light areas. But right above that, where you see that there's like a small black line on this image, there will be a little bit darker often. I mean, all noses are different, but that's how I choose to do it anyway. I am struggling a little bit here with the symmetry, like the one nostril doesn't look exactly the same as the other, and that's why I'm spending so much time trying to get this right. Another thing I can mention is that the more colors you use, or the more shades of colors you use, the more realistic I find it will look. When I started out, I used only 2 pencils. I had the polychromos and I used burnt sienna, I think, and burnt ochre. And those were the only 2 pencils I would use on the entire face. And I mean, I was able to do the shading somewhat correct and right, but it still kind of, it didn't have, I wasn't able to make it look as lifelike. I think that I'm much better at it now that I'm using a wider range of colours in my colourings. So up until recently, when colouring skin, I would just pick the pencils I had available that looked like good skin colours without really doing any research into which pencils of the different brands was best for skin. But I thought it would maybe be interesting to have a look for that. So I found this really nice video by a lady called, I can't even remember the name now, but I will find the link and I will either add it here or add it to the description. And she has really nice tutorials on different skin combination colours for both luminance and prisma. And I think that would be very helpful to look at that. So in her videos, she is showing, I think it was 6 different skin combinations. So she has light skin and quite dark skin and the ones in between. But I do think that all of those are really nice combinations. She also has very nice videos on how she draw and color eyes, nose, mouth, faces. So if you're interested in that, I mean, she doesn't do coloring, she does her own portraits, but it's I think it would be really helpful to have a look at that. So as you can see, I'm still going on the nose. Done some shading on the side of the nose up to here. As I said, this is a very tricky part for me, and I do want it to look perfect. So I am, you know, just adding a bit more. Does it look better? Maybe, maybe not. At least I am now approaching being happy enough with the nose to continue. I'm going to be making another video of doing the hair. And when I was doing that, I decided, there's something up with this nose, and I changed it completely. That will be part of the other video, of the hair tutorial video. So if you want to see a wider version of this nose, you can look at that as well. So I'm now continuing on the rest of the face. So on the left side, because the hair is like hanging over half of the face, there will be some shadow from that hair, and I'm going to make it a little bit darker just by the face closest to the hair. I used the burnt sienna first, but then I realised that it's not dark enough, so I go over with a bit of black afterwards. I don't know, there's just something about this image, it's just so nice, and I really enjoyed colouring it, and that's probably why I've done it so many times now. But I think this is a favourite not just for me, but for a lot of people. Ooh, so another thing that I could mention, which is totally unrelated to colouring whatsoever, but the music that I'm using at the beginning and the end of the video is game music for an Amiga. Maybe it was for Commodore 64, but it's a game called Cannon Fodder. Very old game. Never played it. I used to love playing on the Amiga, but I've never played that game. I just love the music, and I love the music to a lot of Amiga games. It's so epic. So now I'm going to go on and do the shading of the lower part of the face. And what you'll see here is that I will be going too dark, and I will have to erase it after. I'm hoping that it's not too frustrating, seeing that, you know, I make mistake and then I have to go back, but that's just the way I color, the way it works. So I'm hoping this like real life experience is okay. But I do this a lot. I make mistakes and I have to go back and fix it. And I'm thinking it will probably take quite some time still until I will get to a point where I can just, you know, find an image, sit down and color it perfectly on the first try. I'm quite far away from that. This video is quite long, over 40 minutes, even though I sped it up 4 times, so I mean you can calculate then how much time I spent on this. But I do think that for the future, what I'll probably do is that I will make one video that is close to real time, maybe like this, and only have music or something, and then I will do a sped up version where I do some talking. Because it does take so much time preparing this, and it has now taken me a lot of time getting this out. One of the problem is that I'm doing this the program on my Mac, but my Mac is a little bit old now, and it's not dealing very well with recording the voiceover, and I have to take a lot of pauses. And then I have to wait for my Mac to cool down, so it's just taking so much time, so I think that's a better solution. As you can see, once I'm roughly satisfied with how things look, I use the primrose color to try and blend it in a bit. You can of course use a blender, and I've done that many times, but I just find it works absolutely fine, and maybe better for me doing it this way. As you probably just saw, I started erasing on the right side, along the jaw or the chin, on the right side. So I'm using this Mono Zero eraser, which has quite like a small pointy end. So it's really good to use for smaller areas. I like this a lot, and for this paper you really don't ruin the paper at all. And after you erase of course, if you erase like 50 times, you would probably ruin the paper. But if you just use it a few times in the same area, the paper still remains just as good, and you can just colour on top, and that's perfectly fine. In those instances where I only go like a tiny bit too dark, I won't erase. I will just use a lighter pencil on top of it, and it will tone it down, and I'll probably then get the colour or the shade that I want. So when I colour the jawline here, or the jaw on the side there, I don't just use like the burnt sienna. I use the burnt siennas, all three of them. I use the pink and I use the burnt ochre. So I mix all of those pencils to try and get the tone and the shade that I want. I don't always know how or which pencils I will use and how much of one compared to the other. So, but I just apply and I just look at it and thinking, oh, okay, maybe I need a bit more pink here for it to look okay. I have to say that I sometimes find it a little bit difficult to explain. So English is obviously not my first language, but I'm quite comfortable with the language anyway. But I do find myself, for example, if I go to the hairdresser when I'm in the UK, I have such a big problem trying to explain how I want my hair done, because I just don't have the words for those things, and I still struggle. And I think it's a bit of the same with colouring and trying to explain what I'm doing and the features of the face. I just don't know the name for them. I mean, I know eye and nose and stuff, but like those other small areas, I just don't know. So I'm trying my best though. I know I'm probably repeating myself over and over again, but I'm still on the cheekbones and the chin, and also out of camera, it appears. But you can probably see now how much time I spend on like the same areas, just trying to get it the way I want it to look. So it does take forever basically, but that's how I get good results. So I think there's several ways of colouring the face. You'll probably see somebody starting maybe at the top of the face and just completing every part as they coloured like from top to bottom. Or you have people who do it quite roughly to start with, and then towards the end they just fine tune it more and more. I think I do maybe like a middle thing. So I need to put down all the highlights and the shadows roughly where I want them to be, and then I start completing things. But I never complete one part entirely. I tried doing it more so with this colouring, so with the eye and the nose, and as we soon will see, the mouth. I think everyone will just have their own preferred way or their own way that works better. So I think you just have to figure out like what works best for you. How are you able to get the best results? So I have tried in this video to add the name of the pencil at the bottom of the screen when I'm using it, but I am changing the pencil at some points very, very often, and that's why I just add more than one some places, because it would just fade too fast if I did it the other way, because I use it for 2 seconds then I change and so on. But this is just the way I colour. This is just the only way that I'm able to do it to get good results, so you just have to bear with me on that. I'll soon be starting on the mouth now, and this is another feature that I find extremely difficult to colour, as with the nose. I very often tend to change the features of the mouth just a little bit, and I've done that here also with the lower lip, as you'll soon see. Here I'm starting with putting marker on the lips first. It looks yellow, but it's really like really light pink, but you can't really see that on this paper anyway. Again, it's not necessary to use the marker first. I just always like to have a background colour with everything before I start colouring, with of course the exception of the skin, then I normally don't use any marker as a background first. So after applying the marker, I use my white pencil to hide the black lines on the top and on the bottom of the mouth. The top lip I'm not going to change, but I don't want that black line there anyway. And as I clearly never learn, I can't remember what pencil I used for the lip. And again, colouring off screen, sorry for that. I can see it's a polychromos, and I've probably just taken the easiest available pencil in roughly the colour I wanted. So I start with just colouring the outskirts of the bottom and the top lip with that pink that I used, and now I'm going over with a darker colour, so this is the same as I used for the skin, the burnt sienna 50%. So this time when I did the recording, I set up the camera so that I had a closer view on the face, and because of that, especially when it comes to the mouth, it tends to go out off camera. I'm really sorry about that, and I will definitely pay more attention next time. So when I added a bit of the pink and the burnt sienna 50%, I go over with white, and you can see I make that line there, and then I just kind of like apply the white in streaks. So this is to try to like imitate like the natural lines we have on our lips. I then go in again with the burnt sienna 50%, and you can see I make like a line slightly above the bottom line in a way. So I just leave like a whitish or a light area at the very bottom of the lip. And also now when I colour the lip, I try to kind of do it a bit randomly and add like the streaks, because I don't want it to be one even colour. I think that I often like to add maybe a bit more structure than necessary, but I think that I just find it fun. You can of course make the lips look very nice without having as much detail and structure as I'm putting in here. This is just my preferred way of doing things. So I've seen some other people doing colouring videos where they have the sheet of paper or the book in the exact same position through the entire video. I'm really not able to do that. I have to keep turning the paper to get it in the right position so that it's easier for me to colour, and that's why I keep changing it so much, as you can see. You can see I'm adding, well, you can't see all the time, but you can see glances at least of me putting, adding, now you can see I add black underneath the lower lip, and this is to try and create a shadow. Like, for example, my lower lip is really big and it's just hanging over, so there's lots of shadow. Not everyone will have that, of course, but I choose to add that bit of shadow there. I've also added more black between the lips to try and separate them a bit more. So now I'll be going on to trying to kind of like shape the chin a little bit underneath. You can see I put a little bit shadow in there already. So on the side then of the lower lip, I will add some white or a light color. And again, this is, so as I've mentioned before, I often tend to just use myself as a reference. Obviously this girl looks nothing like me, she's much prettier, but I just find it much more easy to use myself as a reference. So for me, at least because I have such a big lip, I do get those highlights kind of on the side, but that wouldn't be the case for everyone. But if you have full lips, at least it will be more light on the sides there. So if I was drawing my own portraits, then it would probably be a little bit silly always using myself as a reference, because then they would end up looking quite similar. But when I'm doing these colorings, because all of the faces are different, so even if I just apply some features that is similar to me, they won't look like me and they will all still look different. And this is just my preferred way of doing it. I find it much more easy than trying to look for reference photos, because my face is always here and it's very easy to just look in a mirror, take a selfie to get that reference. So I then go on to just add some more shadow then under the highlighted places. So you can probably see more clearly now where I changed the lip. So on the original illustration, the bottom part of the lower lip in the middle goes upwards, whilst I've made it more rounded downwards. Again, you don't have to make any alterations, and I know that some people think that it is wrong to do this, and that is disrespectful towards the artists that have drawn the original line art. But I think it's very small things that I'm changing, and I do like to try and make them more unique maybe. I want my colouring to not look like everyone else's, and I find it a fun challenge to try to edit like small parts or features of the face and see how it looks. So for the area between the nose and the mouth, I don't even know if that has a name. I don't even know a name for that in my own language, but you can see you have like those white lines going down, and it's like slightly darker in the middle. So I like to kind of highlight this in a way to make it show, but you don't have to do that. Of course, this will be different from person to person how prominent these features are. So at this point I'm quite happy with the mouth, and for the rest of this video now I will just do a bit of a touch up, try to make the blending a bit smoother, add some more shadow where I see it's needed. So I really hope this has been somewhat helpful. I'm thinking it might not be right to call this a tutorial, it's more like a video showing you how I colour a face. And also me trying to explain a bit how I do it and why I do it. It will probably be a little bit difficult if you try to follow this as a sort of a colour along, where you use the same pencil and do exactly the same thing as me, because I am going quite a bit back and forth, and I change my pencils very often. But I do hope that I have been able with this video to maybe give you some ideas on how to do things, things that you might want to consider when you do your own colouring. So I'm going to repeat myself again. So my best advice, my best tip to get a good result, I think number one is just take your time, be super patient, spend a lot of time on blending, because those things does make quite a difference in the end. If the blending is very nice and smooth, it will look good. And if you are unsure where to place a shadow, where there should be highlight, just look at yourself in the mirror. I think that will help. It helps me a lot. Or of course you can just look at a reference photo of some sort. Another thing I recommend, but this of course is dependent on your style of colouring, but I much prefer using a paper that is not too smooth, so that I can apply many layers, because then you can afford to make mistakes, because you can just colour on top of it, or you can erase it and colour on top of that. As you know, I really love this toned or grey paper, and especially because you can also hide the black lines, and I do get a lot of questions on how I remove the black lines. So if you use this type of paper, you can just hide the black lines by just using a light pencil. On this colouring, I really don't know how many layers I have applied, how many times I coloured over the same spot, but the paper is still 100% intact. I often find that when I colour in books, I tend to ruin the paper when I erase a few times, or if I put too many layers. So one more reason why I much prefer this. I will try to have the video for the hair out soon. I think that will be a much shorter video, because I think that I can just show in real time part of the hair and then speed up the rest, as it will literally be the same thing I'm doing over and over. So I think that's okay for that. I have a Facebook page. There will be a link at the end of the video where I post all sorts of color related stuff. So I tend to post more progress pictures, a bit more detail on pencils and other things. So if you found this interesting, you might want to have a look there as well. With that, I just want to thank you so much for watching, and good job making it all the way to the end. I do hope you found this interesting or useful, and I hope that maybe this inspired you to try and colour more faces. So goodbye for now, and I will see you again soon.